good evening, viewers of TDN Radio, TDN TV, and This Week in Interview. Welcome to, I think this is episode 10 of season 14 of This Week in Interview with your host and guide, Anthony Drago. I am, as usual, I am super psyched that you are joining us today, joining me tonight for This Week in Interview. I always appreciate, I always look forward to spending that time with you, an hour on a Wednesday night, where I get the privilege to speak with such accomplished and interesting folks, and I get to share those conversations with you. So, we at it again. I want you to invite your friends, invite your acquaintances, let them know that this week in interview is on right now, and we have a very interesting conversation on tap for you tonight. We are going to be talking about what's quickly becoming one of my favorite subjects of conversation: writing, and writing poetry in particular. My guest tonight is Miss Celia Sorhaindo. So when you come back from the quick break, I will introduce her to you. Um, Grab you some water or something stronger, something warm. In my neck of the woods, it's raining. It's been raining in New York since Monday. And so there's a little bit of chill that can get to your bones, and a little basilic tea or cime comptoir or ginger or something go a long way to warming it up. So give you a chance to text somebody, to email somebody, let them know that this weekend interview is live. And we'll be right back with my wonderful guest, Miss Celia Sorrento. So, so welcome back, listeners. I hope you had the chance to invite folks to tune in to us. If they are in Dominica, they can catch us live on DigiPlay Channel 59, RVR Jams. Carries this week in interview live on RVR Jams, DigiPlay Channel 59 in Dominica, and also online radio SBE in the Toronto market carries this week in interview live. And of course, we are on Facebook. We have our own Facebook page, This Week in Interview, or we are on TDN's Facebook page as well, TDN Radio, TDN TV. Um, and you can find us on YouTube, on Instagram, and on various social media. If you are watching us on one of those platforms, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and press the notification so you can know when there are other programs coming on, and so you can join. Uh, Before I bring my guest on tonight, I know a number of Dominicans are a little bit in a state of shock in the passing of one of our young leaders. And so my condolences and my sympathies with his family and friends and the entire nation of Dominica. It's always it's always a sad thing when someone goes in the peak, or while they're approaching the peak of their life in terms of their energy and their contributions. And of course, he will be sorely missed. Also, in my family, there's a memorial service that will be held for Brental Cornelius. If you're from Castle Bruce, you remember Brental. On Friday at 6 p.m., there is a memorial service that will be held for him in Houston. So condolences to the family and friends of Mr. Brental Cornelius, who passed away in Houston in February. All right. So Having done dispense with those preliminaries, I want to again say welcome to you. My regular listeners, welcome to you. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And if tonight is the first time that you listen to this week in interview, I want to also wish you a very special good night and special welcome. My guest tonight on this week in interview is Miss Celia Sorhaindo. She in the flyer we described her as the author of poetry that makes her a poet, and she has had uh, a few um, publications. One of them is called, she'll correct me with with the pronunciation, Gaban says. I know I butchered that. She will correct me. Radical Normalization, and her latest publication is Abia, and really wonderful poems that capture life as it happens. Um, in our in everyday life. Her poems are relatable to almost everyone in different at different points, whether we are joyous or we are going through challenges. Um, Definitely. So, Celia, a very warm welcome back. It's been too long, so let's hope that this is the start of quite of a few more visits to us that are more closely put together. But it's a real pleasure to see you and to have you back on this weekend interview. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and thank you to all of you guys, Sam, Nicole, etc., for keeping this going. I think it's such a fantastic thing that you do, supporting, different communities, the writers. You guys have been there from the beginning. I remember from Nature Island Literary Festival days, you were also very supportive. I also want to say I love the title of your podcast. The Find Your Voice. I think that's so appropriate, and something that we all need to do. So thank you, and thanks to the listeners for joining in.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for those kind words. Yeah, find your voice is really what it is.
Mm,
We really have as our goal to provide the avenue where folks can find their voice. I will tell you the number of guests I have had who this has been their first interview on the
yeah,
program with me, and they're coming nervous and you know just spending the hour on this weekend interview with me, it breaks the ice, and I
yeah,
see them go out and really shine and blossom. And
yeah,
when that happens, we smile because we know we are
yeah,
moving along the right path. So thank you for
yeah.
mentioning that and noticing that, and thank you as well. You're one of those folks who keeps the fire burning in terms of providing avenues and outlets for our writers to express their art. And so thank you for that. As you said, with Nature Island Literary Festival,
Hmm.
we're part of the organizing committee for that. And that
Hmm.
really um, removed the bushel, so to speak, on
Mm,
of local writers. There are always a few popular people, Lennox Church and Alwyn Booley, and different folks who are well known as writers in Dominica. But with Nature Island Literary Festival, folks found out that the person next door is a poet, is a writer, is
yeah,
a novelist, is a short story writer, and also with white Tukubuli writers. So thank you
to
for
see.
that work that you do. So in that light, I'm going to give you a few minutes to just talk about writing, your writing,
Hmm.
your passion for writing, your involvement in writing, what writing does for you. Just take a few moments and just um, let the audience remember you, who you are, what writing means to you.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, my background is not actually writing. My actual background of work is actually computer programming.
Oh,
So I came into writing quite late in life, and it was actually the Nature Island Literary Festival that really inspired me.
oh,
I did have my twin sister, Paula, who's now, her name is Imani. She actually wrote a poetry book a long time ago when she was quite young. So she was kind of my first inspiration, especially about what spoken word poetry could do. But
Hmm.
I was always like a maths person, maths computing person. So we were always taught at school that, you know, you were either good at maths or you were good at English. But I really enjoyed both. And through the literary festival, you know, I got to see so many of our local writers, amazing people, got to meet people like Delroy, you know, people like Monel, and people, you know, so many of our different writers, and got to meet writers from the region as well. And so that's how I first got into interested in actually writing myself. But it was probably after Maria, I think, that um, I started to take it a lot more seriously. Hurricane Maria was such a traumatic and complicated time emotionally. I found it really hard to deal with. You know, on one hand, there were so many amazing things, so many people helping each other through, and on the other hand, there was so much tragedy as well. So trying to hold those two things, those totally opposing things, emotionally, was a real challenge, and I found through poetry was a real cathartic way of processing those things. I wouldn't say it resolved it, but it just helped me in my mind to get things straight and to be able to just cope mentally. So I'd say that was kind of when I started to take it more seriously. Yeah.
After Maria, because and I see what you're saying, because at that time it's such a complex mix of
Hmm.
challenges and situations and circumstances. And w- as somebody who doesn't write like that on a regular basis, I see what you're saying, because when you go through one experience, you're trying to keep that experience while you're experiencing something else.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if you have it written down, you sort of, you don't have pressure to remember that emotion because you've written it down. So
Yeah.
yeah. So in that
And
sense,
it's also quite cathartic. It's
yeah,
quite a sort of cleansing thing to do, to write it instead of trying to keep it inside. You know, writing was a good way, and poetry is really good that you don't have to have a resolution in poetry. You know, like in the story, you might have to have an arc of a begin and end with some kind of resolution. I think the medium of poetry allows for complexity, and it allows for nuance and paradox. So you don't always have to have a clean resolution. You can just say, you know, different people experience different things, and you can put yourself in other people's shoes as well, and try and think about how they might have been feeling.
right. And so you mostly write poetry, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And I guess one of the things about poetry is that, whereas if a story, you sort of have to lead your readers through that story,
Yes.
with poetry, you have some freedom where you can just put your stuff on paper and folks can interpret it how what they feel like. It might be completely opposite to what you had in mind when you wrote it, or so on.
Totally, totally. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the word poetry comes from the a Greek origin of poesis, and it just literally means to make. It means making, to create.
To create.
So, of course, there are over time there are formal patterns of poetry. There's different forms of poetry that have been built up. But I always say, you know, we have how many people? Like 8 billion people. No one person poets the same as another. The rules of poetry are there as guidelines to help you if you want to use them. But as a form, the beauty of the form is that you can bring your own experimentation to the page, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
The page is like a blank canvas.
Exactly.
You decide where you put your line breaks. You decide if you want rhyming, if you want sight rhyme, or if you want formal rhyming patterns. You decide if you indent. And when I use the form, I try to use absolutely everything on the page that I can. And I bring what I want to it. But the beauty is that the reader is the additional component of the poem. The reader actually, in a way, completes the poem.
I
Once
like
I've,
that. I like that.
yeah, once I've finished with it, it's done what it needed to do for me. It's then now given for the reader to decide what it is for them. And as you said, it could be that they interpret something that you didn't intend or is totally opposite to what you might have imagined. But as a writer, you once you publish and put your work out there, you have to be ready that that might be the case. The readers are going to take their own experiences and put in their own personal thoughts and interpretations of your metaphors and images, etc. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I always say, a reader creates a new poem. Each reader creates a new poem.
Mm. Each reader creates a new poem. So you put your work out there, somebody comes to that work, and they do what they want with it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Have you I don't have you ever interacted with someone who's read your poem and you were fascinated with their perspective on a particular poem?
Yeah, absolutely. That's always something that's really amazed me. I mean, I must admit, at the beginning, because this was all new to me, um, that was quite a difficult challenge, because one of the things is I use the I in poetry, but
Hmm.
the I is not necessarily an autobiographical me.
Hmm.
It's not actually me saying these actual things happened to me personally. Yes,
Right.
I draw from personal experience, but I also draw from things that I've overheard or other people's experience or imagination. But I still might use the I. So one of the things in the Maria poems, for instance, I had a poem which had a grandmother who had gone through the Hurricane Maria experience. And
Hmm.
then somebody had said to me, "Oh, I'm so sorry about your grandmother." Now, the grandmother was just a container for different experiences. It wasn't my literal grandmother.
Right.
So I felt, because I wasn't accustomed to that, it was something I had to get used to, that people would sometimes read the poems and assume it's 100% biography, and it's not. It's a creation, it's poetry. It's I use whatever I can in my poems. Yeah.
So did that evoke like some kind of like you were inauthentic, or did you?
Yeah, it made me feel like, do they think that, it made me feel like maybe they felt, I don't know, that they expected it to be true. And
Hmm.
when I explained afterwards, it was fine. It was absolutely fine.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's just one of those things that you have to expect. And also, I think the way we were, I don't know about you, but when I was going to school, we were taught to read poetry that way.
Right.
We were taught to read poetry as biography, and we were encouraged to assume that the speakers in the poems were equivalent to the poets.
Hmm.
But these days, with contemporary poetry, that's really not encouraged. They really encourage you to speak about the speaker or the persona, even though the poet may use the I, etc.
Right. You don't assume that the I is in first person. With that
That you don't assume that it's actually the poet,
person.
unless
Right.
the poet is specifically saying this is biography, this is actually true. Then these days we're not encouraged to make that assumption. We're encouraged to say things like the speaker in the poem, the persona.
But
Yeah, so
a number of novels are written that way. Um, where
Yeah,
the story is written in the, and you assume that the character in that is the first person that's
exactly.
been. But I guess
Yes,
in a poem, people someday may have trouble thinking that there's a character in that poem.
exactly. I think it's just a historical thing as well, how we were
Hmm.
taught it.
Hmm.
But exactly, the point you made is absolutely perfect, Anthony, because in a novel, I don't automatically assume that when I'm reading about a character, I'm reading about the person who wrote the novel, unless it's a biography. But
Right,
those are just some of the things that I had to get used to because it was also new. But I enjoy having the conversations with people uh, about the different ways that they interpret the poetry. Yeah.
right. Because I guess in poems, so if you pick up a story,
Hmm.
it's almost automatic that you think that it is fiction, unless it's a, you know, put forward as a documentary or some kind of docu-novel or something. You pick up a book, a novel, and assume it's fiction. And so the locations, geographic locations, the characters, and everybody you assume is fictitious. But with a poem, most people approach a poem as being born out of the emotions or the thoughts of the poet. And so I guess that is what makes that distinction. But where do you draw your inspiration from? I know, so like some folks, they get inspired from nature, and so primarily, or some from human behavior, or some others from their own emotions. Do you have a particular I don't know how you would call it, area nexus that seems to inspire you to want to write more often than not?
Yeah. Well, as I say, all poets are different and they come to poetry for different reasons.
Hmm.
So I didn't come to poetry from the traditional way of I want to be a poet, I'm going to do an MFA or I'm going to study whatever. As I say, really, I think it came from I would say like a spilling over of wanting to articulate something, but not really knowing what I wanted to articulate because of the confusion, as I say, from Maria. And so that was really the driver. And I found that poetry was such a fantastic medium um, and such a powerful medium for experimenting and also investigating different emotions. So it allowed me to do a lot of scenarios or and say things like, "Oh, what if I imagine this from this? What if I put myself in somebody else's shoes and I make the I, it's somebody else instead of
Hmm.
saying she. I actually try and embody those things. So for me, I think the inspiration comes when there's something nagging at the back of my mind, something that's unresolved. Say something I see maybe happening, and it's not that there's a solution, but I'm trying to work through the different
Right.
sides,
Hmm.
say, of the argument, the different perspectives, and poetry really allows you to hold paradox and complexity in a really tight container. And I have to stress one of the best things is I had so much fun taking something that might have been a tragic situation like Maria or the things I write about in Radical Normalization or in Abia, taking those things and creating. It's such an empowering act, and I really want to stress how much fun I have with actually writing poetry. It's just so much. I just really enjoy it. So yeah, I'm not one of those poets who sit down every day and write. It really comes from a mulling something over, and then the poem comes from that. Yes.
And in that writing, does it lead you to like a resolution that you hadn't thought about before you started writing? Does that happen?
Yeah, that often happens. Sometimes I will think I'm writing one poem, and by the end of the poem, it's actually revealed something else, some other point of view, or some way of thinking of something, just really by the form of poetry and maybe trying to find the right words and the line breaks. The line break in poetry is such a powerful tool because you can be writing a line and then you'll break the line, and what you think is going to appear on the next line might be something totally different, or unexpected. So yeah, that's another aspect that I really like, that I myself am surprised sometimes by what actually comes out. Yeah.
So when you start a poem, I guess you have an idea of what it is that you're going to express on that paper, but it really evolves as
Yes.
it goes along, it develops.
Yeah.
Are you one of those writers who go back and then edit?
Um, yeah, the thing again, I do, but the thing with me is I sit with the poem in my head for such a long time before I
Mm,
actually put it on paper. So the refining and the editing process is actually a very much internal process, first of all. And then when I put it down on paper, that's another stage of the process. And then, as I say, through the line breaks, through the shape of the poem, through rhyming or picking different words, something else can be revealed from what originally started in my brain. So I do edit for
mhm,
sure.
mhm,
But I would say the process, by the time it gets down on paper, it's quite a way down the process, because I'm not the type of poet who says, okay, today I'm going to write a poem, because it comes from this spilling over. Yeah.
right, right, right. So I um I hear you describe your school life, and you said you were science slash math, but you also
Yeah.
enjoyed writing. I had that similar experience.
Yeah.
Um, good at science, good at mathematics, but I think I could almost say that I was probably the best English literature student in my
Yeah.
year. And so, like, I still remember all of my literature from high school, and that's a long time ago. All the books that we read, the writers, Shakespeare, poems, short stories, they all are still in my head. And I know I said that I don't write often, but in listening to you, I rethink that. But my writing is more technical. So
Yeah.
I will have something that I'm working on, and I will write it down. And while I'm writing it, the solutions come, whether it's in
Hmm.
construction or in engineering. Write down the steps, and while you're writing down the steps, it unfolds. So
Yeah.
I do write.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's a creative process. Sometimes I think school tries to kind of box you into
mhm,
this or that sometimes, but I think that in anything, you can use creativity. In science, you can use creativity, and I think we should really encourage, not try to streamline children into saying, oh, you're creative or you're mathematical or you're scientific. The creative aspect, the creative spark, I think is in everybody. I think it's innate in human nature, and it just needs to be nurtured and encouraged. And as you say, you can use creativity, you can use writing in technical tasks for sure. Yeah.
yeah, and it I think that ability to interpret
Hmm.
goes a long way because
Yeah.
I read contracts, I read
Yeah.
specifications, and I think I have an easier time assimilating it because of that literary
Yeah.
background. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I would say I didn't really write at school. I was a reader, so I was more of a passionate reader. I've always loved reading. Yeah, I've always loved literature as a reader. So coming as a writer came much later in life. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have reading time. I went to school in Castlebrooks, primary
Okay.
school, and so in the afternoons after lunch, um, there was this author called Longfellow. There was a lot of books in the library. They would give us books and we would read. But when I went to grammar school and I met, there was an older Mr. Robinson there that really got us writing. Arundel Thomas
Yeah.
was
Arundel is a long time.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Um, they would encourage us to write. We would
Yeah.
read and then they would. So there was a lot of writing that was encouraged. Even and then you don't break out until like you're going into your fourth and fifth year of high school. You don't break out into a science stream or an artist stream. So everybody does 3 years of everything.
Yeah.
So so that helped quite a bit. Celia, I have to take a break. It's at the bottom of the hour. When we come back,
Sure.
I'm going to ask you to read one of your poems
Okay,
for us.
cool. Thank
Uh,
you.
so for folks, if you join me late, my guest tonight on this weekend interview is Miss Celia Sorhaindo. She is a poet, and her latest publication is Abia. She has three formal publications. But for now, she'll tell us if she has others because sometimes people publish things as part of competitions or whatever. But yes, she is my guest tonight on this weekend interview, and we're talking about writing. We're talking about writing poetry, and hopefully my objective tonight is to inspire at least one person to start writing. And maybe this time next year you will be my guest with your new book that you were inspired to write. So stay tuned. Let's get a word from our sponsors, and when we come back, my guest Miss Celia Sorrento is going to read us a poem from one of her books, and I'm sure that will be a real treat. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.
Presented by
People say I've got a great smile. Well, I have to say, this is all thanks to the professional team at Beacon Dental Group right here in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I've got world-class dental care. Beacon Dental Group has expert and caring staff dedicated to providing the most advanced and satisfactory treatment in all aspects of oral health. Their services are designed to meet your needs and give you a perfect smile, too. General checkups, cosmetic surgery, Gemini laser service, and advanced procedures, all in a state-of-the-art facility. Call or visit Beacon Dental Group today, 1026 Blue Hill Avenue, Dorchester, Massachusetts, or call 617-282-2146 for a smile that lights the world.
How much Dominican history do you know? Want to learn some fun facts? We have a great and fun way to test your knowledge and learn more about our history. Get your copy of Dominic Anu, Dominica in Puzzle. Fun for the whole family. Available now on Amazon.com. Visit pushpast10.com to learn more. Email us at dominicainpuzzle@gmail.com or call 877-698-9894. Looking to promote your business, engage current customers, and reach new people? Well, look no further. From the basic presentation to a fully fledged advertisement, use your video ads to attract customers. At Man's Audiovisual Productions, we do just that. We produce videos for business and event promotions, product demo videos, animated explainer videos, fundraiser ads, and much, much more. Engage your clients and sell online. We customize the video to match your brand design. Guaranteed to play flawless on all devices, including smart TVs. Contact us at telephone number 203-690-4342 or 767-245-6238. Visit our website, mansaudiovisual.com, or email us at derekvideo@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back. I hope you had a chance during the break to refresh your drink and that you are back in your seat for the continuation of my conversation with Miss Celia Sorhaindo. Um, she is a poet, she's a writer, and we just dive deep into her whole writing process, the whole idea of how she comes across with her poems. Um, Different people have different writing styles, where her inspiration comes from. It seems like most times it's probably situations that in her mind unresolved or need further finessing or optimization, and she gets her mind around it and works it out, and then she gets it on paper. So Celia is going to share a poem with us from one of her books. So Celia, go ahead, tell us what, set it up, and then tell us what it's about.
Okay. I just wanted to, before I start, I just wanted to read a quote by Martin Carter.
Hmm.
And it's poetry, a way of surviving. If life is the question, asking what is the way to die, poetry is the question, asking what is the way to live. And this poem I'm going to read is from Abia, and it's called Filling Holes. And this poem came out of, you know, there had been a few deaths of members of the family, people close to me. And this question of death is always something that was so painful, and the grieving process, how sometimes, you know, it's as if there is, people think there's a fixed time for you to grieve, and how complicated the grieving process is, and coming to terms with death. So just heart going out to all the people who have lost loved ones recently, and I'm just dedicating this poem to them, and it's called Filling Holes.
Very timely.
That day, as before, I tried to shun death, not knowing how to live with her, understand her, make peace with her. Her passing always left me in pieces. Lost giddy, the world still spun, never stopping to take stock. Could I not be still beside myself with grief? Be still with the weight of this missing, to measure the weight of the mist. Thin-skinned in church, constrained in black, I feared the price of society's shameful last respects would cost my conscience. I prayed broken bread would feed, nourish me, strengthen spine to carry this dead weight. I prayed the sermon would comfort, console me. I bowed, shook my head, contemptuous holier than thou words hung grey clouds over all hope to heal holes again. How sad to hear the lifeless judged, how deep some dug to bury, quickly dish dirt over poor soul who couldn't yet turn in grave. I said silent eulogy and wept. The earth had swallowed a beloved body whole, left me a crater I felt forced to fill fast. The casket was covered. Should I not quickly recover, compose, and recompose myself? How should I mark that moment of farewell? The cross is not the sum of a life lost, could never symbolize the root of my world minus one dearly departed. Now, should I compost my despair along with the dead? I spare a second thought for who continually dig these holes open. So thank you. That's from the latest collection called Abia,
Abia. Thank you for
Filling
that.
Holes.
Feeling holes.
Yeah,
Very profound, very deep. And it sounds like one of those poems you can read a dozen times, and every time
yeah,
you read it, you dig deeper. Um, Holes as in a grave, but holes as
exactly.
emptiness in your heart. Um,
Exactly. Yeah,
and
that's the beauty of poetry, that the multiple meanings. Yeah,
right. Hmm. And also, the hole that is left, if that person was your wife, your husband, your daughter, somebody who had a significant
yeah,
place in your life, that place is no longer there. So it's a hole, because who's going to step into? Nobody can really step
exactly.
into that space.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
that.
also thinking
Mhm.
of the people who physically have to dig the holes, of the
Exactly
grave
right.
as well,
Mhm.
all those different levels that I never take it for granted here. We have men who have to actually dig out the holes for us
Right.
to bury our loved ones, and I always have a deep respect for them as well, that they have to be so close to life and death on a continual basis.
Yeah, the grave digger.
Yeah,
Is I remember in a lot of the literature that we did at school, um, they would always have that character of the grave digger as someone who is very sullen, and I've seen it all, you know.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So again, the depth and the texture of your writing of that poem is certainly, um, it displays your skill and your craft. And so that's a nice time for me to ask you to tell our viewers where they can find your work, because I always encourage folks to support the writers, support the artists, because the artist is so important in our community. Our artists, especially in societies like Dominica and the Caribbean, where we are pretty informal and there's no official, how should I say, system to keep records. A lot of our records are kept by artists and writers and poets and so on.
yeah.
And so tell
And
them where we can find your work.
yeah, well, I have most of the books, the three books are available on
On
Amazon.com
Amazon.
or
Okay.
Amazon.co.uk. And locally in Dominica, there's Jay's Bookstore and Zeb Quiol stocks Guabanse. And
Say that word again. I struggled so much with it.
no, you did okay. It's Guabanse, so
Go
the
and
the
say, okay.
Taino goddess, yes, of destruction and renewal of storms. So yeah, so locally there's a few places where you can get the books, or just contact me. I have copies of the books, so anyone who's actually in Dominica can get them from me as
Can
well.
get a signed and autographed, right?
Exactly. But I just want to say, we one of the things I wanted to do in IBEA was I listed a lot of our Dominican poets who had actually published books. And that was really important for me to do that, because to recognize that lineage that I come from, we are passionate writers. Nothing stops us, even though we might not have the financial resources, we might not have the publishing houses or whatever, we have self-published our own books before self-publishing was a thing.
Yes.
People found ways to go around and sell their books. So as a people, we actually come from a very rich tradition of writers, people who have written. So I truly wanted to recognize that, because that has been my inspiration and my encouragement, that we've done it without support from a huge literary network of governments, etc. We've had writers' guilds from such a long time, and we still have, the Waitakere writers. So yeah, we really are a people, a literary people, and even going back to the days of the oral storytelling as well. That's part of our lineage and part of our legacy.
It is. Dominicans are creatives.
Yeah,
It's expressed more in our music because music, I guess, is out there. You cannot keep music in a notebook. You play it and people hear it, but Dominicans are creatives. And as you
yeah,
said,
absolutely.
people typing stuff. I remember growing up, a lot of my friends, a lot of people I know used to have books where they would write songs and they'd write poems and they would write and they keep those books. Publishing was not as easy as it is then, but a few people
Yeah,
like Giftus John and those guys
yeah,
would actually go about and get their work produced. You know, so let's talk. As you mentioned, the White Kubuli writers. Spend a few minutes and let folks know what are some of the support groups or organizations or structures that's available, say for people who want to write and maybe don't know where the resources are, where the guidance, where they can get guidance, mentorship,
yeah,
camaraderie, whatever.
yeah. Nowadays, the internet is just amazing. So, the White Fully Writers was set up by Alec Lazar, I think, and Chris Semelda,
Hmm.
and they're a writing group. If you like a group where you can attend regularly, if you're that kind of person who needs that regular motivation, then contact them. The Waitakuli writers are a set of Dominican writers who will encourage you, motivate you, inspire you, etc. So you can find them on Facebook, and they put together collections as well. They put together a collection of short stories and poems called Montage Dominique, which
Yes.
is available on the internet. People like Nicole and Sam, etc., have been doing the Pitot Noir Collective
Right.
for quite some time. They're another group, and they're more geared towards sci-fi. So if that's your genre, if that's something that interests you, they as well have a set of books that they have different writers contribute to as well. So the Pitot Noir Collective. So you can find them on Facebook as well. Nicole has just always been so encouraging to writers from the time that I've known her. There's online group, the Dominica Poetry Collective is an online Facebook group, and they just share poems in the moment. Ronald Deschamps was one of the founding members of that, who he unfortunately died a couple of years ago, but the group still keeps going. People like Lionel, Leslie, people like that, Rasmo, who have been poets for such a long time. Giftus John, they're part of that collective, and they share their work, people feedback, etc. That's on there. Even though the Nature Island Literary Festival is no longer functioning, I still manage the Facebook page and totally just dedicated to showcasing writers and sharing resources. So anything I come across that's a useful resource for writers or whoever has got a book coming out, then that's a go-to place as well for inspiration and for activities coming up, for workshops, whatever to inspire you. Yeah, and useful tips, useful tools for writers. You can like the page on Facebook, the Nature Island Literary Festival.
So there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of resources available.
There's a lot of
Of
resources
course.
available, yes. Yeah, and online especially, we are so blessed. I think about the writers who started before the internet and how they did what they did with
Right?
such limited resources. And now we have, online workshops, we have literary festivals, we have tools, we have tips, we have writing prompts, we have people who give feedback. There's online groups, there's reading groups. as well, that where you can read together. So there's so many more things available to people who
Yes.
are starting to write.
And
Yeah,
people are willing to share. You know, somebody wants to
absolutely.
publish, they put a question in a forum and 10 people respond. This is how I did it. This is what you can use.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
So
it's a
so
different.
those are a few places available. So just I really advise people to utilize those things for information. Yeah.
So let's talk about your work, your three publications. Let's start from the first one. Let's go to the next one, and then the latest one, not the current one, but because they're all current, the latest one, Abia. Just take us through the evolution of your writing career.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'll call it a career, but but yeah. But yes, so Guavanse was really the first published collection that was published. I don't know if you know Polly Patello from
Yes,
Patriot
she was my
Press.
guest on this program before. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So we're so lucky to have Polly because she is based here in Dominica, but also in UK.
Hmm.
So she's somebody who can tap into both markets, and she knows a lot about. She's been in the publishing industry for quite some time, so she knows about a lot about the publishing industry. So I was really grateful to Polly to agree that she agreed to publish Guavanse. And the collection actually was longlisted in the Trinidad has the Bocas Literary Festival,
Hmm.
and they have an award called the Bocas Literary Prize. So Guavanse was actually longlisted for that in 2021. So as I say,
Congratulations.
yeah, so that was really one of the highlights, and Polly was really great because it was my first publication. So she was very patient because I had a lot of questions, and she was very patient in explaining the publishing process to me, about the publishing contract and things like that. So I'm so grateful that I knew her as a friend, so I could ask her those things.
Right.
And so, as I said, that came out of the Maria experience. The next,
So before you go to the next one, what about the name? Because you say it was a Taino, she's a
yes,
Taino goddess, and now you're saying it came back after Maria. So what's the connection with the name and
yeah, well, as I say, a lot of my inspiration comes from things that I'm thinking about, things in this
Mhm.
space, things that I'm mulling over. So when I was thinking of the name for the collection, the Taino, who were the indigenous people of the Caribbean,
Right,
they weren't so much. People don't think they were in Dominica. They were more in the Jamaica area, Cuba, those sort of spaces. But you never know where the indigenous people traveled, because really the sea was their habitat. They moved up and down the island.
right.
So
Hmm.
so I happen to be reading a lot about the Taino and a lot about their beliefs, and I'm a real believer in respecting indigenous knowledge. We are so blessed to still have the Kalinago people here in Dominica, who have survived so many different tragedies, and who have been fighters and warriors and protectors of the land. And I'm a big believer in respecting indigenous knowledge.
Right.
So
Hmm.
when I was researching about the Taino, they believe in this goddess called Guavanse,
Hmm.
and she's for them, she's the goddess who is of storms, of hurricanes. And it's so fascinating that even before satellites, before that technology, in their petroglyphs, they were able to depict the swirling arms of the hurricane and the
Oh
hurricane
wow.
eye.
Hmm.
And so I was just so fascinated by that. I wanted to honor their memory and honor the memory of our indigenous peoples by naming the collection after the goddess. Yeah.
That's
So,
interesting. I'm happy I asked you that. No, was the next piece of work? Um,
yeah. So after that came radical normalization, which was
Radical
in,
novelization. That's an unusual name
yeah.
for a book for a book of poetry. But go ahead.
Yeah. So that one again, it was mulling over. We hardly ever talk about mental health in the Caribbean. There's still so much shame and so much stigma associated with mental health. And the thing is, especially after Maria, we've gone through so many different tragedies. Before Maria, there was Erica. There's always something. And we always have this thing, oh, we're strong, we're resilient. And although that is true, there is a cost to that. And, you know, there's a lot of stress. There was a lot of stress after Maria. And, one of the things that we saw out of that was, sometimes the brain cannot cope. The brain needs a break. The brain can say, that's enough. And, sometimes the way we treat those with mental health issues, even the way we talk about mental health, is something I think that we could really look at, because the old models are really changing about mental health. People are doing a lot of research to say that it's not actually necessarily a problem with the person. It could be the environment that they're in. It could be something that happened in childhood. So instead of just finger pointing that
Right,
there's a problem with
right,
the individual, let's look at some of the root causes as to why people experience these mental health issues or short-term crisis, and let's think of ways that as a society, as a community, we can do something to address some of the root causes. So radical normalization came out of that, and the dedication I have in the collection, um, if I can just read it
sure.
out, if that's okay.
Mhm.
This book is dedicated first and foremost to the loving memory of my father, Martin Clive Sorhaindo, also to the mad and messy people, past, present, and future, those locked in attics, real or imagined, the disbelieved, the shrew, wandering womb women, those deemed to be too sensitive, too loud, too wild, those who see the world in a flood of disordered symbols, those too far away from normal, insane, out of their right minds, and those who were toppled or were tipped over the edge by this beautiful but complex and often painful existence on earth. So the collection deals a lot with those kind of themes, how self-care is not selfishness, that it's really important that we take care of ourselves. It's really important that we look after our mental health. It's really important that we look at all the the ways that we have toxins around us, the toxins that we put into our body through what the food we eat, or the environment that we're in, or toxic people even. So that's how that collection came about, was thinking about all
Very,
those
very
aspects.
interesting. And I think very relevant.
Yeah,
Folks need to really think about those among us who,
yeah,
like you said, it's not that they're abnormal, they're just further away from what
exactly.
we consider to be normal.
Exactly.
Um, you know,
Yeah, and I always think, who decides on this term as normal? It's a
normal,
it's
right?
it's a spectrum, and
Exactly.
interestingly enough, in other cultures, say on the African continent, or if you go to some South American countries, the shamans and the medicine people, the wise people in the communities, are actually the people we would probably term as mad or crazy
Exactly, right? Yeah.
in Western society.
Because they talk
So
to spirits, they get inspiration.
exactly, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
So there's different ways that we can look at things and different ways that we can address things and different ways that we can maybe assist people and help people instead of just shunning them and shaming them.
yeah. That is so
Maybe.
serious. I
Mm,
was just reading the report from the judge that just finished the assizes in Dominica. Two in a row, and he was talking about folks who need mental care who are being held at the prison,
yeah,
and
absolutely. It's
and
very sad.
a suffering
Yeah,
because of that experience. So that work is
yeah.
really relevant. We probably need to highlight that a little bit more. I think it's a real need, a real need.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And all of us can go through periods of,
yeah, mhm,
mental instability. And as I say, this thing that we're so strong, yes, we're resilient, that is true, but we mustn't forget that there's a price to that. And if you keep compounding trauma on top of trauma and we've never gone back to heal the root causes,
then
then
it snaps. Yeah,
yeah,
then,
there's going to come a point
mm,
when it might seem like a very trivial thing that could be the thing that just
yeah,
breaks
yeah,
somebody. So just to
mhm,
be a bit more compassionate as a people, that
yeah.
we're all going through struggles and yeah, so that's where radical normalization came from. And with that one, I decided there's a publishing company in UK, and they had an open reading period, which meant that people could send in their manuscripts and they would consider them for publication. And that's some of the things I share on the Literary Festival Facebook when
Hmm.
people publishers have open reading periods for people who have a manuscript ready that you can send it. So I just happened to send it just before the deadline, and they agreed to publish it,
Wow,
which was
that's
fantastic.
tremendous, right?
So
Yeah. Wow,
yeah, so that
tremendous
one,
accomplishment.
yeah, was radical
Radical
normalization and
normalization.
normalization, yeah. And the final one, which
Not the
actually,
final, the latest one.
yeah, well, interestingly enough, I haven't actually written for quite some time. I haven't
Mhm.
written in over a year.
Oh wow.
And again, because I just haven't found that urge or that inspiration, as I say, that's why sometimes I don't call myself a poet, because I don't sit down and force myself to write every day. Um, so Abia, that one, actually, I would say that probably was the starting point, because a lot of the poems in Abia were the first poems that I sent out to journals and things like that when I
Mm,
first
when you
started
first started.
writing.
Hmm.
Yeah, and they were the first poems I showed to Polly. But at the time, she felt that putting a pamphlet together, which is a smaller collection, she
Hmm.
advised that that's the best course of action, to put together a small pamphlet of poems first.
Right.
So Abir actually contains my very first poems, and it actually contains the two last poems that I ever wrote. The actual first poem in Abir and the last poem in Abir were kind of the last poems I ever wrote. So it's kind of like the baby that kind of started the whole process off.
Hmm.
And the themes in Abia are to do with migration. And because, as you can tell from my accent, although I was born in Dominica, I left Dominica when I was 8 years old and spent many years in the UK, and then came back to Dominica in 2005. So there's always this sense of where is my home, because in England, we experience so much racism and things like that. And then coming home again, one of the reasons Polly and I did those interviews for the book called Home Again, Stories of Migration and Return,
Hmm.
it can be very difficult for people to come back to Dominica if they've been away for a long
Yeah,
time.
yeah, it's an adjustment,
And
right?
yeah, and so as well, I really loved your conversation with Lloyd Pascal last week,
Mm,
because he talks about the mass migration of enslavement and the
right.
exodus,
Hmm.
and this fact that, you know, as African descended people, we have been cut off from so much. We've been cut off from our language, our original languages. We've been cut off from the spirituality that we had at the time. So Abir is trying to talk about these things. Can we ever find this point of resolution? Can we ever be whole after all these movements, after all these fragmentations, and also the internal fragmentations within us? I always say that we are not one thing, like Anthony is not one person. The Anthony who is at work, or the Anthony with his friends, or you know, the
That's
Anthony in
very
different
true. On this
scenarios.
weekend interview, yeah, and then
Exactly.
on a construction site, it's
Exactly.
yeah.
You're a different person. There's not
Mm.
one fixed thing that says you are this person. And you know, we've got different aspects. So can we bring all these things from our experiences, all these ways that we might feel fragmented, all these ways that we might feel alone? Can we ever reach a point where, you know, we come to terms with everything that we are and everything that has happened? So the collection is kind of a tying up of all those different kind of themes. Yeah, and
Does the word Abia mean anything in particular?
yeah, well, the title for that one was interesting as well, because I had lots of different ideas. At first, it was called Creation, um, and then again, I'm very interested in different spiritualities, people's different religious beliefs. And I try to see if there's common threads between all these different beliefs. Are there common threads between, you know, Roman Catholic, Hinduism, Jewish
Haitian voodoo,
theology?
yeah.
Exactly. Are there
Mm.
some common threads? And I was really interested in the Kabbalah and the Jewish mysticism,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a term for the creation process itself, how humans were, this mythology of how humans came into materialization, came into material body from the spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the way they describe it, it's the passing through four different worlds into manifestation. And Abia is the anagram of those four worlds, which is A A B um, ABYA, and I slotted the I in the middle
Mm-hmm.
for the
Mm-hmm.
individual that is created out of the process of those four
Okay.
worlds.
Mm-hmm.
So they are Absolute, which is the emanation process, Berea, which is the creation process, Yetzira, which is the formation process, and Asiya, which is the actual action manifestation. So I felt that was so fitting, because the creation process itself is like that. You know,
Right.
the creation process starts in our heads, and then we have to bring it into manifestation through different
Right.
stages.
Right. Right.
And then we actually share it with the world, the actual physical object, through the publication, whether it's on paper or whether it's speaking it to somebody. So I just thought that was such a fitting
So Abia
process.
is the whole creation process, the whole
Exactly, the
process.
whole creation process. So I thought that was a fitting title for how the individual comes into being and how the individual creative item comes into manifestation. So that's where Abia comes from.
It just seems like you give so much thought into the title. It's like the title of your work in itself is a poem. Yeah.
Yeah, like I say, I try to utilize everything, and I'm so
Mhm.
grateful of the front cover. I met a wonderful artist when I
Yeah.
went to Trinidad for a writing workshop. A wonderful artist called Danielle Boudou Fortenay, and her work so resonated. And this was way back in, I think, 2016 that
Wow.
I bought this piece of artwork, and she had called it Sanctuary.
Hmm.
And when I was putting this collection together, I asked her permission because, again, it seems so fitting as a
Yeah.
front cover
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
it's a pregnant woman and that whole creation birthing process.
Very, very
So
interesting.
everything
Yeah.
just kind of lined up, and all the elements just kind of came together.
Yeah. Even
Yeah,
the cover is a work of art. Wow.
yeah. Well, it
Wow.
is actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Literally.
I just love her work. So I'm
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
grateful
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
her. Yeah.
And the heart, her heart is clearly featured, and
Exactly,
yeah.
which I think, I honestly believe, like we were talking about mental health and everything that everybody's going through. I just think compassion and love, honestly, I think that is an underestimated, powerful force. Um, Compassion and love.
The most powerful force in the
Yeah,
universe, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Because right there, it's out of that is born all our creations.
yeah.
Yeah. So we have been through an hour. I feel like this
Wow.
conversation could go on and on and on because it's so interesting. But congratulations on the
Thank
publication
you.
of your three works and your latest one, Abia. Although you say it was the Genesis, you took your time and
Yeah,
practice, and then you brought it forth.
yeah,
There was a certain finality, finality in you saying, that was my last poem that I wrote.
yeah,
I hope I read too much into that. That it's not actually that there will be an after or a next life where more poems come out because
yeah.
you're such a gifted and talented person, and the things that you write about are so relevant. So once
Mm,
again, I want to say congratulations and thank you for sharing this with us. And I started the conversation by saying it's been a while since you've been here.
yeah,
Let's get you back sooner because there's so much more we can dive into. Maybe we can
yeah.
dive into each one of those themes in that book there. Mental health, especially, um, seems to be so required right now.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I must tell that I'm going to send you a list of different poets as well because I'm so like you, so passionate about encouraging people in Dominica to write, and you do such a great job of, you make people feel so comfortable when they come on your show.
Thank you.
So one of the books I love, there's a young poet called Anella. I don't know if she's ever, Anella Shillingford. I don't know if she's ever come on your
No, she
show,
has
but
not been on my show, but
okay.
send her over
Yeah, I'll
definitely.
send. She has this collection called Of Rivers and Oceans, which I absolutely love, and she would be a brilliant person
Thank
for
you for
for
that.
you to
Thank you
talk
so
to
much
as
for that
well. So
recommendation.
I will send some details over, and just thanks again to you and Sam and Nicole for all that you guys do, and yeah, let's talk about different ways that we can showcase the various writers that
All
we
right.
have in Dominica. Yeah, that would be cool.
And thank you for all you do and for the inspiration and the mentorship and all of what you do to keep it alive. Because as I said, a lot of the recording of our lives is
Yeah.
in all societies is done by artists, but some societies have formal ways of doing it. They have libraries, they have
Hmm.
museums, they have a lot of things that we don't have, and so the role that artists like you play is so outsized. in a informally run society like Dominica, that we really have to show the appreciation and the support. And so,
Yeah.
listeners, I'm imploring you to. I shouldn't have to implore you because the work itself is great, but I'm imploring you to support the artists, buy the books. When you're giving out gifts,
Yeah.
think of getting a book and give it out as a gift. Um, uh, of having it on your bookshelf, or having it on your coffee table. That beautiful work of art can fit right on your mantle or on your coffee table, a great conversation piece. So I encourage you to support the artists, and just it's small, it's the price of a six pack of beer, or if you're into wine, a
Yeah.
bottle of wine, and it goes such a long way. So I
And it
encourage you to
means
do
it
that.
means so much. It's just the best feeling when somebody has bought your book. And
Exactly.
Sam had bought the book and he sent me some feedback, and it was just such a great feeling because it's a really, really lonely and quiet existence being a
Yeah.
writer. I can tell you.
It's like when I started doing this program, it was radio, right?
Yeah.
And you have no idea if there's anybody listening, but you do it anyway.
Exactly. It's really like that. It's like, is there anybody? So those things mean so much.
Yeah,
And just to say, it's National Poetry Month as well.
it
So
is. Mm.
if you've never thought about writing, on the Nature Island Literary Festival site, we share writing prompts, and I really encourage you, if you've never thought about it, just give it a go. Just try to write a poem. Yeah.
Oh, awesome, awesome. So, Celia, thank you so much. And I guess
Thanks
I can
again.
tell you happy Poetry Month. Is that what it is? Yeah, to
Yeah,
all
that's right.
to you and all your fellow poets. And thank you. I
Okay.
really appreciate you taking the time to be my guest on this weekend interview. I'm seriously honored um, by that gesture, blessing my show with your brilliant work. And so thank you and all the best.
And thank you, and to all the team. Thanks again, Anthony. Okay, and take care.
All right. Take care. Good night.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye. So, listeners, there you have it. Another awesome, awesome conversation. At least, as I say, being the host of this weekend interview exposes me to the opportunity to speak with such brilliant people, such interesting people, talented and gifted. And so I am blessed. I'm blessed, and I am doubly blessed because I have the opportunity to share those conversations with you. And so what I would like you to do is go to TDN Network One on YouTube and subscribe. Also follow us on Facebook. Just find us because we have all of these wonderful programs, and I get a lot of comments that say that the program is great. Um, More people should have access to it. There are quite a few people who do on a weekly basis. We reach a few thousand people, but more is always merrier. Um, and so share it, let folks know that what we do on a Wednesday night. And I want to wish you a very healthy and safe and successful remainder of your week, an enjoyable weekend. Um, Stay safe, and we'll do this again. Next time, Farmer Nestor just joined us. No, he didn't just join us, but he just said he just made a comment, so I know he was present. He said, "Great show. Looking forward to being back on this program soon." Yeah, we used to have you on very, very often. Bless up, Anthony, on the brilliant work and great job, Celia. So Nesta is saying hi. All right, so folks, I'm going to leave it there, and we will do this again next week, Wednesday. And happy Poetry Month. Good night.